Hello, everyone. Welcome to our WellNurse Spotlight. My name is Charlene Platon, CEO and co-founder of WellNurse, and we are so excited to present this event to you today. This is our very first LinkedIn Live event, and so we are extremely excited. We are really honored to present our guest speaker for today. His name is Keith Carlson, and Keith Carlson is a registered nurse. He's a career coach, writer, podcaster, social media influencer, motivational speaker, popular career columnist, and award-winning nurse blogger. His message of savvy career advice for nurses has been featured by nurse.com, nurse.org, Working Nurse Magazine, American Sentinel University, Multi-Briefs Nurse Service, Staff Garden, American Nurse Today, nursingce.com, among many others. Keith is a board-certified nurse coach and CBC, and he has logged more than 1,500 hours of providing holistic career coaching for nurses throughout the United States and abroad. Keith's podcast, The Nurse Keith Show, offers inspiration and support for nurses seeking meaning and satisfaction in their personal and professional lives. He was also co-founder and co-host of the RNFM Radio, a groundbreaking and influential nursing podcast. Keith's message of dynamic empowerment reaches thousands of nurses worldwide. He can be found on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and at nursekeith.com. Keith lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico with his adorable and remarkably intelligent cat, George. So I'd just like to introduce Keith. Hi, Keith.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Charlene. Thanks for having me, and hello to everyone out there in live stream land.
Thank you so much. And we also have our co-founders, Catherine and Jillian, here on the line with us. They will be helping to actively monitor any questions that may come up. So for all of you who are watching us live today, if you do have questions, please post them on our various live stream platforms. Right now, we are broadcasting on LinkedIn Live, Facebook, and YouTube. So go ahead and feel free to ask questions during the duration of the conversation. And so we are so excited to have you today, Keith. And, Keith, it's been so great to connect with you over the years. And it's just awesome to go full circle. You introduced me to LinkedIn several years ago, and I've been loving it ever since. And now we have you on our LinkedIn Live platform, which I think is just such an awesome way to kind of bring it all together.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And that's part of networking, right? Where things kind of go around in circles and you just kind of reconnect and connect and reconnect and connect. And it's one of the wonderful things about being out there in the world, isn't it?
Right, absolutely. And so, with this conversation, we have a lot of interest from nurses who want to know more about your journey. I think you have a large following on social media. You have a large following on your podcast. And so there's a lot of nurses out there who really are inspired by your journey. And I'm just wondering if you could start the conversation by telling us a little more about yourself and your career in nursing.
Oh my gosh. Well, I earned my associate's degree in '96 when I was 32 years old. It was my first college degree. So I had a high school diploma till I was 32, and I had done all sorts of things, but nursing became the focus for me in my early 30s as a father of a young child, and I needed to set an example for my son. Hope I've done a good job. And I did what many people said was professional suicide, including my professors, which was I decided not to work in acute care at all. And I can hear the gasps out there in the audience, and I can assure you it actually was not professional suicide. And I've been fully employed for 24 years, except at any times when I've chosen not to be employed. And that's a different story. So I understand and understood at the time that there's a liability and a risk to take when one chooses not to go into acute care, but I did it anyway because I was pretty clear and remained clear. So I really focused on community health, outpatient case management in the HIV world, as well as home health, hospice, and a little stint in public health. So it's been a really interesting journey as a clinician, as a professional. And my last actual job where I got a salary was as chief nursing officer of a home health agency in Albuquerque. So that's sort of the very quick down and dirty history of my nursing career, if that's enough for the moment.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great, Keith. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
And I think it's really interesting. You mentioned a lot of people don't really go into, or there's a lot of people who choose not to pursue, or who there are a lot of people who do choose to pursue the acute care path right away.
Mm-hmm.
And you're one of the nurses who has chosen to kind of steer on a different path, but also showing or demonstrating that you could build a very successful nursing career, even if you're not doing the traditional route. And I think that's been always an inspiration for myself as well, as someone who's followed your podcast for some time.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And it's, like I said, there's a calculated risk in whatever we do, whatever choices we make in our lives, in our relationships, in our careers, and we all have to take the steps that work for us. And I never encourage someone just flippantly to, oh, you don't have to go into acute care. I'm very, very careful. I always explain this was my particular choice. I understood what was going on when making that choice. And it's everyone's path and journey to do what's best for them. And I just help people make informed choices.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, speaking of that and helping to coach other nurses,
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your career as a holistic nurse coach? And, a lot of nurses may not be familiar with this type of a coaching path, and we would just love to hear more about that.
Sure. I'll try to make it brief, but coaching's been growing over the last decade or so, more or less. That's when it kind of really seemed to take off in the United States about 10, 12 years ago, though I know it was happening prior to that. And I became aware of it, and I did some like little classes and weekend certifications and stuff. And I kind of realized, yeah, there was definitely something in this for me, though I was still working relatively full time at the time. So I launched a little side practice, just a side hustle, offering coaching to nurses, actually to anyone at the beginning. And then I kind of kept niching down into nurses. And coaching has slowly become more codified. It's not regulated. So there's no licensing for coaches anywhere in the United States. There's certifications, but you always have to remember that anybody can create a certification course. There's really no, it's kind of the Wild West still with coaching to a certain extent. There are different organizations kind of that have been jockeying for position as the leaders in coaching, and the International Coach Federation and others are definitely in the forefront. Though my friend Barbie Dossi here in Santa Fe and Linda Bark and Susan Hess and some others, they decided to actually create a nurse coaching track for nurses to be able to receive an actual designation that would be recognized by the AHNA and the ANA, et cetera. So they did that. And that's the International Nurse Coach Association, INCA. So there is now an actual designation, Board Certified Nurse Coach, NC-BC, and several others too. And those can be pursued through the American Holistic Nurse Credentialing Corporation. That's the credentialing arm of the AHNCC. So while coaching is still not regulated, there is now this path, and there are several ways to get to the goal of taking the exam and being certified, where you can actually be a certified nurse coach, whereas you can do other trainings and become a wellness coach, etc., but it's not as a nurse coach. So I think it's really exciting that nurse coaching has coalesced and actually become something fairly widely recognized within the profession.
That's wonderful, Keith. Thank you so much for that, and for that explanation. I think it's really important for nurses to know about those avenues. And I myself have been familiar with several nurses who have reached out to me saying that they are interested in pursuing nurse coaching as a career path. So it's awesome that these different opportunities have opened up for nurses. And, it's absolutely a career modality to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, did you actually always think about coaching though, or was there a specific, experience or a moment that really led you to have that aha moment, like, I really want to do this?
That's a very good question. No, I was hearing about it, and then my wife took a certification, and it kind of became a conversation among people that I knew. I started to meet people who were coaches, and I just started dabbling in the field. So it was really serendipitous to a certain extent, and also just kind of watching what was happening out in the world. And I've always been interested to see, what are people doing? What are people interested in? What are the new things in nursing? What are the new things in healthcare? And I started seeing wellness coaches and health coaches. And then I noticed that there were organizations that were actually training nurses and healthcare professionals to be health coaches. So that kind of pricked up my ears and made me realize that, this is actually really becoming a thing. So that's when I kind of hopped on the bandwagon, did some trainings, and learned that it was actually something I could pursue. And once I'd actually been doing coaching for quite some time, actually, I learned about the International Nurse Coaching Association and the board certification. So that's when I decided to go for it and get ready for the exam and take the exam and get certified, which was about 8 years ago now, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Keith. And I know you're right. There has been, there's health coaches, there's wellness coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of different avenues that I think really complement nursing very well. And so, so I think that's awesome to hear about those different avenues.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually looks like we have a question from the audience. And the question is a coach another name for a mentor?
Oh, it's
and I think that's actually a really good question.
Hi,
oh, yeah. Hi, Chris.
Chris is the best. Well, Charlene, you're the best too, but don't tell Chris I said so. Okay. So no, it's not the same. So I believe coaching and mentoring are somewhat different. I see mentoring as let's see. I see mentoring as looking for or getting in touch with a person who has more experience than you, who has a richer history than you, or knows certain things that you don't know, who can actually hold your hand and kind of walk and support you through a particular process. Sometimes there are actual mentoring programs in healthcare organizations. If you're at a hospital or a healthcare system where you're lucky enough to have a mentorship program, you might actually be paired with a mentor who shares your interests, and that person can actually be there to guide you and help you in that process. I see coaching as similar, but I think there's somewhat of a difference where a coach does set goals with you like a mentor might, but I believe that coaching, in my estimation, is much more goal centered, where we're actually setting up a path of completion, a path of accomplishment, and setting steps for that, which a mentor may do. So I believe also at the same time, and this might sound confusing, that mentoring and coaching, they kind of work hand in hand, and I think there's overlap. Though I believe a mentor, say in your hospital system, who you're working with on, say, some aspect of your professional growth, may not really be looking at your life in the bigger holistic picture. They may be helping you with one specific piece. They might be helping you like, let's see how we can help you move through the clinical ladder, and let's help you move towards this particular goal. And so this might sound confusing, because I think there's still quite a gray area between mentoring and coaching, but I do think there can be distinct differences. And I believe that when one is out in the, let's say, quote unquote, the marketplace as a coach, I think that also has a different ring to it. When you say I'm a career coach rather than a career mentor, I just believe there's some nuances there that I believe we're still teasing out in the profession. So Chris, that might be a really horrible way to encapsulate it, because I think the gray areas still exist. And I'm still obviously making it really clear right now that I'm still thinking it through myself.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I see we have a lot of interest in the chat. So I'm going to actually bring in our two other co-founders here, Jillian and Kathy. Kathy, do you want to bring up the next question? Oh, Kathy, sorry, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Keith, we actually have an audience member who is from South Africa who's joined us today on our live stream, and she's an
Gloria.
RN,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and she wanted to know if you do coaching abroad.
I do, Gloria. Yeah. I've worked with nurses in several different countries. I actually hear from a lot of nurses on the African continent for a specific for an unknown reason. I just seem to be getting a little foothold there in a way. And I've spoken with some nurses in South Africa. I've worked with some nurses in other countries, though the preponderance of my clients are in the United States. Though I do continue to hear from people around the world, and my podcast reaches people everywhere. So I think that's how some people discover me on the internet.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And Jillian, do you want to bring up the other question that has come up?
Sure. It looks like somebody's asking about whether or not coaching is time limited.
That's a really good question. And we could also tie that into mentoring. Like, let's say if you're in a mentoring program at your hospital or healthcare system or clinic or wherever, it might be a time limited thing where you're paired with a mentor for 6 months or 12 months for a particular process. That might be possible. And in coaching, it is often time limited because it's, from my perspective and from my practice, it's a business. And when I engage with a client for coaching, we decide on a package of coaching, and that package generally has some sort of time orientation to it. So that definitely puts a limit on the coaching. And there are coaches out there who actually offer what we might consider, what would you call it? Sort of like, the nurses and doctors out there who do concierge medicine, where you pay a monthly fee and you have access to that doctor or nurse 24/7, for an ongoing basis. So certain coaches do offer concierge type coaching where you pay a retainer and they're there for you over the long term. And I have not done that with anyone per se, though I would be open to that. But in general, in my practice, it is time limited. Though people are always welcome to sign up again for another package.
That's great. Thank you so much, Keith.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to see so much interest in the coaching. And we do have some other questions too. And Kathy, could you ask the question from Tasha?
Oh, sure. So this question actually is, can you speak about the limitations to coaching to people only in the states or countries you are licensed?
Oh, yes. Okay. So licensing is an issue. And if you speak with Barbie Dossi and the people at the International Nurse Coach Association, that's definitely something that we need to continue to look at, and people need to really do their due diligence around that. So when you're doing health coaching, when you're really coaching someone on nutrition or the medications or anything that's still within your nursing scope of practice, according to the rules from the International Nurse Coaching Association, that you really should, quote unquote, I'm saying should, practice with clients who are in the state or states where you are licensed. Now, there is some conversation going on if you have a license in a compact state. Like I have a license here in New Mexico, so I can ostensibly work in, I think it's 27 or 28 states around the United States. There's some conversations around, can you do health coaching as a nurse across state lines within the compact if you have a compact license? That is still not been fully vetted to the best of my knowledge. Now, I do career coaching. I don't really talk with people about their health. We might, have a passing conversation about, that they've been meditating or that they've been eating really well or something, but I don't really do health coaching. So I don't feel concerned for myself because we're talking about resumes and career growth and cover letters. So I don't feel that I'm outside my scope of practice and that practicing across state lines is an issue for me. However, if you want to become a health coach, really dig deep and talk to the experts out there, because there are some issues and there are nurses who are coaches who are taking the risk of practicing coaching across state lines. And I can't really predict what will happen in the years to come. I hope we can clarify that more for everyone, because there's a lot to clarify.
Great, thank you so much. And that's a really great question about coaching.
Great question.
Really awesome questions and engagement from the audience today. And Jillian, there's a question from Gloria, if you'd like to read that one.
Yeah, so Gloria is asking, where do you begin when, say, for example, she might say, I don't know my goals, but I want to change. Where would you start?
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's a great question, Gloria. And that's actually what a lot of nurses come to me with. They say, I just feel like I need a change. And honestly, that's how I was feeling about 5 or 6 years ago, when I really was feeling like, I feel like I need to move towards being 100% self-employed. I don't quite know how to fully get there. But sometimes people come to me where they don't even know that they want that they want to be self-employed, or they want to change specialties, but they feel it in their body. You know, a lot of us nurses are pretty intuitive, and a lot of us are in touch with, the somatic sense in our bodies. And sometimes we just know. It's like that nursing intuition, that spidey sense we get with a patient. Like, this patient's about to crash. I don't quite know why, but something's about to happen. So we can feel that in our lives, we can feel it in our relationships, and we can feel it in our careers. So the first thing I like to do with clients is I ask them a lot of open-ended questions. And I like to explore the things that make them happy, the kind of lifestyle they will live, and the kind of lifestyle they want to live. If they feel like they need a change, like a geographic change, I like to explore, is you looking for a geographic cure, or is there really something about moving to another country or another state or province that is kind of lighting your fire right now? So I like to ask lots of questions, and I like to dive pretty deep. And I understand very clearly the boundary between coaching and psychotherapy or counseling. And I know where to draw the line and say, you know what, that issue about your dad, definitely got to take that to therapy. But we can still dig fairly deep and see if there's any subterranean issues under there that are impacting why it is you're feeling like you need a change. And then we kind of excavate a little bit. And before we get to writing the resume or doing any of that stuff, sometimes we really need to look at motivations, goals, and what the person truly wants out of their life and out of their career. And for me, because I call it holistic career coaching, I don't just want to know, what you want to do with your career. I want to know, who are your children, and what do they like to do, and tell me about your spouse and your pets and your community. And that really helps me understand someone from a really bird's eye holistic viewpoint.
That's great. Thank you so much, Keith. And I just wanted to ask this next question too. And
Sure.
This is a question that's really resonates with us too in the WellNurse team. But could you let us know, what is your number one tip for a nurse pursuing the entrepreneurial role?
Oh my gosh. Well, the first thing is to understand that entrepreneurship is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Kind of like your nursing career. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So if you're going to launch a business, one is you have to understand that you're not going to make a lot of money overnight. You might not even make a lot of money in the first several years or the first 4 or 5 years. So business is an adventure. It's really interesting. It's really fascinating. It can be maddening because there's so many things to do and so many moving parts. And whereas as nurses, let's say if you're working on a unit, you know what you need to do. It's fairly task-based. Things are not prescribed. You have to really pivot a lot. And that can actually help you in business because nurses know how to think on their feet. They know how to change in the moment, how to turn on a dime and figure out what the next step is. Oh, this patient's crashing. I'd better do X, Y, or Z. And in your business, it's the same. You need to keep your eyes on the patient, which is your business and your clients and the marketplace. So it's good to speak with and learn from other entrepreneurs, especially those who are healthcare professionals and or nurses especially, and learn best practices, learn worst practices, learn from others' mistakes. So the first thing that I like to tell people about business, and this is where I'll just stop for now, is that the notion and concept of business hasn't really changed since the days of cave people. And that might sound strange, but I'll explain. So back in the days of cave people, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years ago, there actually was what I would say is business on a certain level. One person knew how to tan a hide that you could wear and keep warm in the cold weather. Another person knew how to, let's say, hunt and take a bone and turn it into a weapon or a utensil. Those two people exchanged, they bartered their services or products with one another because each one was able to solve a problem for the other person, a problem they needed solved. So business has not changed, though now we exchange money usually rather than bartering. So your business needs to actually solve a problem using a product or service that you come up with that a target market is willing to pay for because they want you to solve that problem for them. So that's how I explain the basics of business. And that's one of the first things is you need to explore is, do I have a solution for a problem that someone would be willing to pay me for? And then you figure out who those people are and then how to reach them. So those are some of the very, very basic pieces I start with when someone comes to me to ask about entrepreneurship and business.
That's great. Thank you so much, Keith. A lot of great pearls that you shared in that answer. And I know that nursing entrepreneurship has become such a big topic in the last year or so. And it's just wonderful to see so many more entrepreneurs, nursing entrepreneurs pursuing that path.
Absolutely. Many, 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 countless at this point.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we have another question about coaching. Kathy, would you mind reading this question?
Oh, absolutely. Gloria has another follow-up question she wanted to ask. She wanted to know how long your sessions last for, and have you ever had a client come back for re-coaching that you coached before?
Oh, good questions. Wow, Gloria's like spot on today. Thanks, Gloria. So yeah, most sessions tend to be somewhere around an hour, though I'm actually super flexible in coaching. Like even if I've scheduled an hour with a client and after like 35, 40 minutes, I can tell the client's exhausted. Like they're like, they can't take in any more information, or they tell me like, oh my God, my brain is exploding. And I'll say, okay, let's stop here. So an hour is sort of a traditional coaching session for many coaches, kind of like psychotherapy or counseling, it's usually about 50 minutes to an hour. And yes, many clients actually have come back for second time for coaching. Sometimes someone will work with me on, video-based or telephonic coaching. And then we'll switch to what I have actually for clients is email-based coaching, where they need a little bit of accountability, but they don't necessarily need long conversations. They just need me to be checking in with them on a regular basis. And we might email every day or every other day. So some clients choose email-based coaching, and that's a really nice follow-up to an intensive coaching series where the person just wants to, they don't want to close the door because they need just a little bit of help, kind of crossing the T's and dotting the I's to get to where they're going. So I hope that's helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Keith. And I wanted to shift gears a little bit. And, we love to ask questions regarding well-being and self-care during these spotlights. And, I know that you have a lot of passion in terms of, burnout resilience for nurses and promoting the well-being of nurses.
I do.
And so, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that. And, and just to start, how do you define burnout and resilience?
Oh boy. Well, Burnout manifests in different ways for different people. And there are evidence-based definitions of burnout, which I do not have at my fingertips at the moment. I don't want to wander away from this tab on my computer to look it up. But I believe burnout manifests in particular ways. I actually burned out a number of years ago and had to, had to really work hard to overcome it. So it can actually manifest physically, relationally. It can manifest in terms of just deep, deep unhappiness at a soul level. It can also manifest as a symptom, might be compassion fatigue or compassion fade, where you're just not feeling much for your clients and patients anymore, and you can't really understand it. And there's another term that is bandied about a lot, which is depersonalization, where you're just not feeling much. You're just sort of cut off. There's sort of a numbness that comes over you. So for me personally, it manifested as extreme fatigue, codependence with a number of my patients, actually. That's a long story, but really just getting to the point where I felt like my patients were living in my head. My clients were just there all the time, and I couldn't extricate them. And it was impacting my personal life, my marriage, my relationships, my ability to care for myself, and my ability to feel that I had any room in my life to take care of myself or experience joy. So burnout can manifest in different ways, though those are some of the symptoms that I experience that I've seen in others. And my friend Carol Gino, who's a well-known nurse, she wrote a book called A Nurse's Story back in the 80s. It was a very, very popular best-selling book. It's a New York Times bestseller, actually. And she calls compassion fatigue soul drought, where the nurse's soul actually feels like it's parched. It's completely parched, and it can't, there feels like there's nothing left, like the gas tank is empty or the battery is run out. And I also see a term that I've used somewhat is emotional depletion, where it just feels like your emotional, the buoy of your emotional health and well-being is just kind of gone, and you're kind of set adrift in a way, to continue that metaphor, where you just feel like you've lost sight of yourself and who you are and why you're doing what you're doing, and your career and your work and even your personal life starts to kind of really lost its luster. And that's how I could encapsulate it really quickly here.
Right. And I think that you emphasize a lot of great points about burnout. You know, there are physical manifestations of it, there's mental, and just overall a shift in how you go about your career, your personal life, and even passions. And one person had asked, you do help others to get in touch with their passions, and what are some of yours, and how has this helped you with your journey with burnout?
Wow. Okay. So passions. My passions these days, one is revolving around art. I've been doing visual art again. I was a art student and dropped out of a couple art schools back in the early 80s as a young man. So visual arts has slowly been seeping its way back into my life after a long drought. Speaking of the word drought, I actually have passion for relationships. I am a highly relational person, even though I'm also somewhat introverted at times. I'm actually somewhat of an ambivert. I can be both an extrovert and introvert, though I feel that relationships are so central to my life, my relationships with my colleagues, with my clients, and with my friends and my family, that I'm actually quite passionate about how important it is to maintain relationships and keep in touch with people and maintain open communication. And I'm very passionate about making sure that I allow time in my life for things outside of work, though I do work quite a bit. I do spend a lot of time working, and I catch myself sometimes that I've haven't taken a break, haven't had a meal, haven't gone for a walk, haven't called a friend. So one of my passions actually is helping my clients and helping people in my general world and my sphere is recognize when you actually need to take a step back. And I'm not speaking from some soapbox where I'm this perfect person. I recognize my own struggles. I recognize my failings and my failures and my weaknesses and my blind spots, and I talk about them freely on my podcast. And I'm happy and open to talk about those things. So I'm passionate about helping myself to walk my talk as best as I can, even though I realize that sometimes I don't. And sometimes other people have to call me out on that because sometimes I fall off the wagon myself.
Right. Thank you so much, Keith. And you actually brought up a lot of great points there. And I'm also a fellow ambivert and someone who loves relationship building. And
Right.
and that is something that really helps, me personally too, is connecting with others, helping others. And I think that you emphasize a lot of important parts about helping yourself when you are burnt out. I mean, I think first recognizing that those feelings are happening. And I think so often in medicine or in the healthcare industry, there is a big tendency to push through a lot of these feelings and kind of not pay attention to it. And I wonder, could you tell us some other types of ways that you've effectively handled burnout, and maybe what's worked really well for you or some of your other clients when helping them through this?
When I was first really manifesting very intense symptoms of burnout, well, like I said, affecting relationships, family, work, the ability to even experience joy, it was my wife who actually pulled me out. She basically grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and said, you know what, you got to quit that job. So that's actually what I did. And it was due to her being assertive enough to say, you know what, something's really wrong and you need to change this really quick because it's going to have long-term consequences for you emotionally, physically, and otherwise. And I think it had already embed itself in my body and psyche in many ways. So like I said, she grabbed me and said, you know what, this has got to change. And I really did change it thanks to her. And I took a job close to home. It was kind of a cushy job as a public health nurse in my little town where we lived in New England. And I could bike to work or take the bus, and completely changed the paradigm of my life. And that's what started me on this course to be able to even consider becoming self-employed. So it was thanks to her that shift took place at all. So when I'm looking at other people's lives with my clients, we really need to dig deep. Like I said earlier, we need to look at the subterranean rivers of emotion and feeling and history that are flowing underneath someone's career. So like I said, I do know where to draw the line between psychotherapy, counseling, and coaching. However, we also need to be certain that we look at the aspects of someone's life that are impacting their work and the aspects of the work that are impacting their life, and extricate the pieces or remove the pieces that can be removed. Like, you've been working in the ICU so many years. Maybe it's time to do some home health, or maybe it's time to take a little step back, or maybe your spouse can step up and earn more and you can go part-time. So there's lots of little tips and tricks for recovering from burnout. But the first thing, you start with the nursing process. And if there's any nursing students listening, they're probably rolling their eyes, but you start with assessment, and then you go to diagnosis and then planning. So you have to start with an assessment in order to really go deep as the client is willing, and figure out what's going on, and then find avenues out of that dark place. And I actually just saw that question asked about getting in touch with your passions and recovering from burnout was actually from my wife, Mary Rees. Hi, Mary.
That's great. Thank you so much, Keith. And you did share a lot of great pearls there. And I do think, burnout is such a prevalent part of our healthcare industry today, especially with everything happening out in the world, as we all know, in this new normal. And And I'm wondering too what your thoughts are in terms of, because you mentioned nursing students, and I wonder for new to practice nurses or for nursing students, do you feel that currently they are emotionally equipped or to practice in healthcare, or do you think that there's something missing that we could fill with that gap?
I can't say that they're emotionally equipped or not emotionally equipped, because that's really that's an individual situation. And we have new to practice nurses who are in their 20s, just out of nursing school from high school. We have some new to practice nurses who are my age, who are in their mid 50s. So we can't say that they're emotionally or not emotionally equipped. What we can say is that everybody brings to their practice and their career all the baggage behind them, whatever has gone on in their lives, their childhood, their adolescence, their marriage, their relationships, their health, their mental health. Everything comes along with them. It's kind of like when, like I mentioned, the geographic cure, that notion of, oh, I'm going to move across the country, everything will be great. Everything that you've been carrying with you, all your baggage, gets in the car with you or gets on the plane with you and comes wherever you're going. And you're still going to have to deal with it at some point, even though moving might change the paradigm for a little bit, or graduating from nursing school might be really exciting. So what I believe is that in nursing schools, to a large extent, I can't speak for every program, but what I'm hearing from new grads and what I'm hearing through the grapevine, through the ethers out there, is that nursing schools are not preparing nursing students very well for the vicissitudes and challenges of practice. They're talking to them about, documentation and task-based work, and all the things that will help them pass the NCLEX and be able to emerge from nursing school, pass the exam, get their license, and get a job. So that's great. However, I don't believe nursing schools are addressing bullying. They're not addressing incivility. They're not addressing self-care to any great extent. They might pay some lip service to self-care, but I don't believe they're preparing nurses for how challenging the world is out there right now. And I really feel for nurses who are entering the profession during the pandemic. I think that's a whole nother conversation. But I don't think our nursing schools are doing a good enough job on that kind of psycho-emotional and psycho-spiritual level.
Right. Thank you so much, Keith. And I do think that there definitely could be room for improvement in preparing our nurses right from the beginning, when they're students, when they're in school. And, especially with COVID, I think that really shifts the need, or it really emphasizes the need for this work. And, and there is a question that has come up. And Kathy, do you want to share this question from Tasha?
Sure. So what long-term consequences to the nursing field do you envision as a result to COVID-related burnout if we don't address nurse resiliency? And also, what is the one best thing we can do to address it, in your opinion?
Great question, Tasha. And I also want to just point out to the moderators that there was another question from Gloria that we didn't get to, so maybe we can circle back to that one. So the long-term consequences of the nursing field related to COVID. Oh my gosh. Well, I believe that we are already seeing a great deal of attrition from the profession. There are nurses who are quitting. Yes, there are nurses who are hanging in there, and we bow deeply to them for their service. And I'm greatly concerned for the ones who have been slogging away in the ICUs and COVID units and ERs and all the other units, the step-down units, where they're just doing superhuman work for the last 9 months, and it looks like it's going to be quite a number of months further. So I'm quite concerned. So the long-term consequences are that, one, young people, or maybe not so young people, watching the news, watching the nurses staging walkouts, hearing nurses complain about not being taken care of, not being given enough PPE, not not being given the nurse-patient ratios that they truly need in order to provide good care, even in COVID units. I believe that is really bad PR, just to be a marketer, very bad PR for the nursing profession. Even though we're the most trusted profession in the Gallup poll every year, year after year, for 19 years now, I believe, even though we have that public trust, even though people are more and more recognizing the importance of nurses, especially when the feces hits the fan, so to speak, like during this pandemic, and nurses have stepped up and stepped up and stepped up over and over again and continue to. My worry is that the profession is losing people now. We're hemorrhaging nurses now. And if we don't take care of our nurses who are there on the front lines right now and give them what they need, and I don't mean just giving them a mask, I mean a lot more support than a mask. It's a lot more than PPE. If we don't do that, I feel like we could be doing long-term damage to the profession. And it could scare people away. And it can also cause this undercurrent of deep secondary trauma that I believe the profession is going to really have to dig itself out of for a long time to come. So we need to address resiliency, and it's not just about telling people to go home and take a bath and light a candle and meditate, though those things are wonderful. We need to provide much, much deeper support to our nurses in order to provide for them the basis of their resiliency. And the leaders out there need to watch their nurses very, very closely over this next 6 months, 12 months, or actually the next several years. They need to watch people closely, and leaders need to understand what they're seeing in the nurses and how certain behaviors might tip them off that a nurse is truly having a hard time. And then we need to actually have ways in which we know we can intervene that can help that nurse recover, take a break, get the support he or she needs so that they can come back into full practice and be healthy and as happy as they can be during their practice. So I hope that's a good answer for Tasha, just for starters, but we could spend probably a good hour on nurse resilience.
Right. We should bring you back for another hour to talk just on nursing resilience. And and you brought up a lot of important details about the current state and the future state, right? If we continue on this path where nurses who are needing support aren't able to really get that support that they need. And you also mentioned secondary trauma. And,
Yes.
you know, I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. And I'm not sure if you've had the experience of other students or other nurses that you're coaching right now who might be facing that. And, you know, how can we support those nurses, and also what can we do to keep ourselves from facing this secondary trauma during this time, like you said, when we're watching all these events on the news with nurses and all these things that are happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to just respond that there was a note up there in the chat that schools teach to the boards. And yes, schools teach to the boards, and that hobbles education so much in a certain respect because we're not addressing these issues. And Charlene, in response to your question, you know, there's a way in which we need to circle back and evaluate what secondary trauma truly is and the impact it's having on our workers and ourselves and our colleagues and our direct reports. And we need to realize that you can't just go home and drink a glass of wine and take a bath and then your secondary trauma is gone. So those practices that we put into place, we exercise, we spend time with our families, we try to eat well, etc. We practice our faith, or whatever it is we do to assist ourselves in that day-to-day recovery, there's this longer term, deeper recovery. And like I mentioned earlier, to go back to that metaphor, there are these subterranean rivers of emotion and spiritual distress and damage and fear and anger and everything else that comes up in the course of practicing nursing or healthcare that need to be addressed. And especially now during the pandemic, we've probably all seen these videos on YouTube or on Instagram or anywhere on social media, or heard interviews with nurses saying, I felt absolutely devastated when I held up an iPad to a dying patient on a COVID unit so that his wife could say goodbye. And a nurse on an interview I watched yesterday on Instagram, I believe, on a video, she was saying that's not a way a family member should have to say goodbye, and it's not a way a patient should have to say goodbye to their family. So we have to consider, what does that nurse take home with her when she was the one holding the iPad, witnessing this tearful goodbye between the wife at home and the husband prone on the bed in the COVID unit? What does she take home with her? How is that going to impact her on a deep soul level? And how are we going to rescue her when that basically implants itself in her psyche and in her body, and then starts to manifest in different symptoms? And then how do we pull her out of that and help her to heal? So that's part of how I look at secondary trauma. And the pandemic really throws into relief the ways that we have not been addressing it in nursing school and are not addressing it in our workplaces.
Right. Thank you so much, Keith. And I think that you explained it beautifully, and you gave really great examples that are, this is all happening right now. And, even if you're not on the front lines, if you're a nurse, you still can be very much impacted just from what you hear about what your colleagues are going through. You don't even necessarily have to see that, but you could still feel that. So I do think it's really important to be aware of that and to be mindful of that. And thank you so much for sharing your insights on that.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And I'm wondering too, we could also, I wanted to know too, as we're approaching the end of the hour, can't believe we're already almost at the end. But was there anything that you wanted to share too, for just in general for nurses who might really be struggling right now and who really need this support, or any advice that you might want to share?
Sure. And if we can, I can't see it. Can you scroll back to Gloria's last question from a little bit ago, if we can get back to that one. But in terms of nurses right now, Charlene, you're asking what people can do in the moment now. Is that what you would like?
Right. Mm-hmm.
One is to keep an eye on yourself, a very keen eye on yourself, whether you're on the front lines or not, because I believe the entire country, the entire world is experiencing secondary trauma to a large extent. So we need to watch ourselves very carefully, and we need to keep an eye on our family members, and we need to keep an eye on our neighbors, our community members, and our colleagues. And when we see something that doesn't feel right, when that nursing intuition, when that spidey sense goes off and you feel like, my colleague is not quite right, like something is not right, think of ways, or reach out to your supervisors or your therapist or whoever you can to come up with ways to address that with your colleague. And it can be a simple question, like an open-ended question, like, are you okay? Or is there anything I can do for you today? Is there any support you need from me right now? So rather than saying, you look really stressed or you look really tired, which is sort of like the finger pointing and can make a person feel kind of pointed out, like there's something wrong with them. It pathologizes them. Rather, if you ask a question and just show compassion for that person and just ask if there's something you can do or say or be for them. That's a great way to begin. And we can turn that on ourselves in a good way if we can say, what do I need today? What do I need to do for myself? And nurses are really good at doing that for other people. So I would say keep an eye on yourself and see if you can ask yourself the compassionate questions that you would ask for to another person. Can you turn it on to yourself and beam that kind of compassion to the interior rather than to the exterior world?
Thank you, Keith. That's wonderful. And I love that you brought up the idea of compassion, you know, being compassionate towards yourself as you would be towards others. And, you know, for myself too, it always helps for me to just imagine how someone else who I love speaking to me in a way that's compassionate and kind, because I find that I speak to myself not as compassionately as I would see my significant other or my friends speaking towards me. So that's, I think, something that really resonates. And I think that's right. And I think that's great that you mentioned just checking in with your colleagues, you know, because everyone's going through so much hardship and so many challenges. So even just asking the question, how are you doing today? I think that's extremely important during these times.
Yeah. And it's not the simple in our culture, how are you? I am fine. It's more, how are you today? Like, really, how are you today? There's a big difference. And I think it's important to realize that. And if you're really going to ask someone how they are, be ready and willing and open and demonstrate your willingness and openness to actually hear how they are.
Right. That's a really great point. I know that a lot of people may not be ready to accept the answers that they hear when they do ask, how are you? So it's really good to be mindful of that.
Good point.
And with the last few minutes that we have, I do want to circle back to that question from Gloria. So Jillian, would you be able to read the question?
I actually can't see it any longer. Are you able
to?
Yeah, I can see it actually. So the question is, it looks like Gloria works in both the ICU and the IPC, and she's certified to work there. So she's worked in ICU and invention, prevention and control, and she realized she loved the ICU. She is more introverted, so I think that's why it resonates more with her. But she also wants to know what's happening outside of the ICU. And so let's see, I think she's just mentioning it's hard to go to meetings and kind of learn more about other fields. But what would you advise to someone like that, who's like Gloria, who's interested in learning about other fields?
That's a really good question. And that actually ties into the secondary trauma and the burnout, because we need to understand what other nurses are doing, what's really happening out there, what's really cool, what's new, what's interesting, what's fascinating. So if you're in the ICU and you feel like, man, I just need a change, use LinkedIn, use networking, ask for informational interviews. If you see somebody who does something really interesting, write them a note, invite them for a chat, hop on Zoom with them and say, can you spend 15 minutes with me and just tell me about what you do? Like, what's great about it? What's not so great about it? And if you want to do what someone else does, say, what are the mistakes you made on your path? Is there anything I should avoid? Or is there anything you'd highly recommend that I do to prepare me for this particular avenue? So I believe talking to people, I mean, meetings are great, but it's hard to get to them. We can't go to them right now anyway, except online. So one-on-one conversations with people is super helpful, just to understand that there's an alternative, that there's something else to do. And I think in terms of secondary trauma, in terms of realizing that there are other ways to be a nurse, can help us feel less guilty for bowing out of, say, the front lines and doing something else. And survivor's guilt is a thing, but for those nurses who've been slogging it out there in the COVID units, sometimes you do need to step away and allow someone else to step in your place. And there's no shame and no blame in doing that if you have to.
Right. Thank you so much, Keith. And I think that's a great summary of that question and how we could explore other fields, connecting, networking. LinkedIn is an amazing tool. You're all on LinkedIn right now watching this, or on YouTube and Facebook, but it's all part of the connection, and enables connection, especially in this time when we can't meet face to face. So lots of different avenues for that. And just one final question before we end today, but what kind of nursing experience is required to become a nurse coach? So I think you might have answered this before, but just to summarize.
Adrian, there's no specific experience required to become a nurse coach other than doing coaching. There's no, requirement for having been a acute care nurse or anything like that. So if you go to the International Nurse Coaching Association, INCA, or you go to the American Holistic Nurse Credentialing Corporation website and look up the requirements for becoming a board certified nurse coach, it's pretty clear what you have to do. It's actually hours of coaching rather than what you've done as a professional nurse that matter. And there's the skills and the knowledge that are needed to pass the exam. So that's really a big piece of the nurse coaching designation, is being able to pass the exam that's been put together by brilliant exam writers, and it's constantly being revised. And there's a wonderful textbook by Barbie Dossi et al. That will guide you through the entire process. So I encourage you to look it up and talk to nurse coaches out there, because it's a pretty wonderful journey, and a lot of those skills can be used at the bedside as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith. And we are already at the end of the hour. This was such an enlightening, eye-opening, inspiring conversation. And we really appreciate your time so much, Keith. And, we just want to say thank you for everything that you do for nurses, and, just in general for your show. And thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure. And I just want to extend my thanks to everyone who is here, and for you three founders at WellNurses for inviting me, and to all the nurses out there who are working, whatever you're doing, it matters, whether it's home health, school nursing, ICU, community health, it all matters. And whether you're on the quote unquote front lines of the pandemic or not, your work matters, it counts, and we're all in this together, and we're all going to get out of this together.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith. And where can nurses find you?
The easiest place to find me is nursekeith.com. That's where you can find links to my podcast episodes and all my social media. I am Nurse Keith on Twitter, Nurse Keith Coaching on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm here on LinkedIn as well. So nursekeith.com is the best place, and my podcast, The Nurse Keith Show, is on any podcast player or app you could possibly name. So feel free to look me up. There's over 300 episodes, so there's just a little bit of listening to do.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith. And thank you everyone for participating. We will be having more of our WellNurse Spotlight events every month on this LinkedIn Live platform, as well as YouTube and Facebook. So please tune in, and we'll see you next time. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all.